Revelation 19, verses 11 through 13. It's Revelation 19, verses 11 through 13. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True. And in his righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. And he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God.
Well, good evening. It's great to see everyone tonight. I've had a wonderful day. It was great to be with you all this morning. I got to meet many of you for the first time today, having met several of you and several of the elders and their families last night, and getting to be with the Langfords as well. That was a real joy, and I'm looking forward to furthering those acquaintances this week. Got to spend this afternoon with Derek and Vivian and their family, and getting reacquainted with them after a number of years of not being able to be around them very much. It's just great to reacquaint ourselves with those that we have known and loved in the Lord in years gone by, and to make new friends, and I appreciate so much the opportunity to be with you this week. Tonight we're going to kind of look at the other side of the coin of what we talked about this morning. We talked about trust being a gift that we give, something that we bestow. It's something that we place in others, that we invest ourselves by trusting other people. But tonight we're going to look at the other side of that coin, and it reminds me of something that my wife and I have been privileged to do over 100 times over the last 17 years. We have had premarital counseling with over 100 young couples. That's an amazing thing. It doesn't seem like, as the years go by, you don't think about that, but as you look back and you realize, wow, we've had this opportunity with over, not necessarily 100 couples, but 100 people, at least 50 couples over that 17 years, to talk to them about laying a foundation for marriage. And in those conversations, one of the things that we talk about in every instance is this. We ask the question, what is the hardest thing to gain and the easiest thing to lose in a relationship, and specifically in that context, a marriage relationship? But I think it's true in any relationship, in our friendships, it's true in our relationships in the business world and at work, and it's true in our relationships with one another in the local church as Christians. What's the answer to that question? And because we've been talking about it, you already know exactly where we're going with this, but I think you would agree that the answer to that is trust. Trust is one of the hardest things to gain, and it's one of the easiest things to lose. But something that I firmly believe is that Christians, of all the people in the world, should be the people who others outside of the church and outside of Christ look at as the example of trustworthiness. In fact, what I think people ought to be able to say about us is something to the effect that even if I don't believe everything that they believe, or I'm not sure about everything they believe, I do know this: when they make a promise, I believe them. Think about that for a moment. What if all the people that you knew and all the people that were associated with the members of this church here in Louisville could say, I'm not 100% sure yet that I believe everything that she believes, that I'm convinced of everything that he thinks that that's the truth. But I'll tell you what, when he gives me his word, when she says she's going to do something, I 100% believe in what they say. I think that's critically important, and for the reason that we'll eventually get to at the end of tonight's lesson, which is kind of where we began with the scripture reading. I love that expression. Jesus is described there as faithful and true. And if you and I are following the one who has the title, who bears the name faithful and true, that characteristic ought to be reflected in our lives. That we ought to be growing increasingly like the one we follow. In fact, the book of Luke, Jesus describes it this way. He says that those who are trained in discipleship will eventually become in all things like their master. That's the goal of discipleship, is to be transformed in our character into the likeness of the one that we follow. And if we claim to follow him who rides the white horse, if we claim to be followers of Jesus Christ who bears the title faithful and true, then we ought to be known in the community as the most trustworthy people known. And that whether people believe everything that we believe or not, they believe in what we say because we follow the one who is faithful and the one who is true. That's evangelism, whether we realize it or not. Evangelism is not just going out to people and talking directly about the gospel, though ultimately it must come to that. But first, it's gaining credibility with people. First, it's causing people to want to be interested in listening to what we have to say because our character has demonstrated to them something about us that is different. And I don't know anything more important than this. If people will identify you as a person they can trust, a person whose word can be believed in, a person who can deliver the goods that they promise on, then they're going to become interested in why. Why are you that way? What is it that has made you to become such a faithful and reliable and trustworthy person? And then you've got the opportunity to say, I can explain to you why. It's not because of some genetic predisposition that I have. It's not necessarily just because that's the way I was raised. It's because of who I follow. Can I tell you something about him? That's the way evangelism works. And so we're going to talk tonight about this idea of becoming a trustworthy person. And I want us to think about that and think about what we're doing with the trust that other people place in us. Think about that. It's a gift. It's a gift that somebody else has given us. They're taking a risk when they trust us with something. Whether they're trusting us with their heart in a marriage relationship, whether they're trusting us in our work, in the business place, whether they're trusting us in some other task that's related to the work of the church, if we're trusting one another in our households and families. When someone places trust in you, they're giving you a gift. They're leaning on you. They're leaning on you. They're relying upon you to fulfill the obligation that you are accepting when you accept the responsibility that you have taken. And so if we recognize that, we have to ask the question, and that is, what's going to happen to us as we either fulfill the obligations and fulfill the trust that others place in us, or else don't? And if we take it for granted, if we betray the trusts that others place in us, what we are going to see is that our relationships will suffer and our opportunities are going to diminish. Our relationships are going to suffer and our opportunities are going to diminish if the trust that other people are placing in us is squandered, is diminished, and is not taken seriously. I had a friend in high school, and he's still a friend, believe it or not, after I tell you the story. I'm not going to say his name because you never know with the World Wide Web what somebody's going to hear, but not like he wouldn't know it if he heard me tell the story. But anyway, it was my junior year of high school, and I had a fancy for this cute blonde who had just graduated the year before, and made the mistake of telling this friend of mine that I was going to take her, she was going to be my date to homecoming that year. I was going to ask her to be my date. And it was going to be the second time I asked her, because the first time I asked her, the reply was no. And so about 6 months later, I got the courage up to ask her again. I was going to ask her again, and I told him about this. And he said, oh, she's not dating anyone? I said, not right now. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call from him, and at least I'll give him this much credit. He let me know. He said, you're going to be mad at me. I said, why is that? He said, because I called Janice and asked her if she'd go to homecoming with me. See, he was trading on insider information that I had given him. And I said, well, what'd she say? And she said yes. And I said, well, good for you. And I was pretty upset. But the interesting thing about that story is when she found out what he had done, she called him and said, I'm not going to go out with anybody who would betray a friend's trust like that. And I got my first date with Janice without even having to ask her for it. And while this individual and I have remained, though distant, friends through the years, it was certainly the case in the aftermath of that I was very careful about the information that I entrusted with him. And isn't it true that as we betray trust, there's a downward spiral that takes place in our relationships? and the opportunities that we have because we squandered the last one that our boss or our loved one or another person that has entrusted us with us, that we didn't carry and fulfill that obligation well, and so the fewer and fewer opportunities we have to do so in the future. But if we value other people's trust as a sacred gift and we honor it as we should, then there will be an upward trajectory in our life, in the quality of those relationships, and in the opportunities that we have in the future. Jesus put it this way in Luke chapter 16 and verse 10. He said, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." That's a simple statement, but it is so profound and so insightful and so true. I know a lot of young people, for instance, who struggle with the idea that they don't have a big job to do. They can't get this big break. They know that they've got potential. They know that they could do something if only given the chance. And what I try to encourage them to do is to just do the best they can with anything and everything that is within their grasp. No matter how menial the job, no matter how small the task, take hold of it and do it with your might. Do the very best that you possibly can, looking around you for every opportunity that you can to prove yourself competent and prove yourself faithful, because not only are you going to be strengthening yourself, sharpening your skills, and ready for what's next, you are also going to be recognized by those who are giving you those small tasks as competent and reliable and trustworthy, and given opportunities to advance and to go further. And that's the same way with our relationships with one another. As people in this congregation come to see you as someone they can trust, someone who can be given a job, an assignment, and a task, no matter how big or how small, if you faithfully execute that opportunity, the elders or whoever else has a position of responsibility is going to be far more likely to come to you again and say, "You did an awesome job. Can we call on you to do this next thing?" And so we want to become trustworthy people. So how is it that we can increase our trustworthiness? And one more word that's, all this I know is a long wind-up and introduction. But how can we become more trustworthy? And I've highlighted the word worthiness here. This is critically important to me, because I'm not offering a technique in how to get people to trust you. The question is never, how can I get people to trust me? That's the question a con man asks. That's the question a pickup artist asks. How can I get you to trust me? That's not the question. The question is, how can I become a person worthy of another's trust? How can I become the kind of person that is recognized as reliable and faithful, because that's the kind of person that I am? Because the worst thing that can happen to you as a young person, middle-aged or older person, whoever you are in life, the worst thing that can happen to you is somebody actually trusts you with a burden that you don't have the capacity to bear, because you have not developed the character to be a trustworthy person. So the question is not, how can I get people to trust me? The question is, how can I become a trustworthy person? Just 4 things tonight. And the lesson will be yours. I got that from Don Truex, and it just sticks. 4 points, and the lesson will be yours. If only I had the voice and the presence, right? How can I become a trustworthy person? Number 1, you can tell the truth. Or as Jordan Peterson puts it, at least don't lie. And that's actually an important distinction, because you don't always know exactly what the truth is in a given circumstance. You may not always know, okay, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not exactly clear about that. But at least we do know when we're lying. We do know when we're not telling the truth. We do know when we're telling the client, yeah, we can do that, but I'm pretty sure we can't do that. We can deliver it on this time under these terms, but in the back of my mind, I'm hearing that voice saying, probably not. And so even though we may not always know the truth, we may not always know exactly how things are going to go, we do have this God-given sense innate within us to know when we are communicating something to another person that isn't true. And we must not do that. We cannot become a people who are trustworthy in their character if we say things that we know are false. In Proverbs chapter 34, verses 12 and 13, the Word of God says, whoever of you loves life, whoever wants life and all that is signified by the wonderful expression of the word life. Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days. And don't you want that? You want more life. You want more opportunities. You want good days. You want more deep and meaningful relationships with people. So how do I do that? I do it by this. Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from telling lies. And that's harder than it sounds. It's harder than it sounds. Keep your lips from telling lies. What it calls for us to do is to be people of integrity. It's hard because the truth can be unflattering. The truth can be uncomfortable. We want to avoid as much trouble as possible, don't we? And we find ourselves often just saying the expedient thing in order to avoid a conflict, avoid a problem, to get through the moment. And we'll say things to friends, to family, to brothers and sisters in Christ. We'll tell the boss something. We'll tell the client something simply because it's the best way, it seems to me, in the moment to just get through this situation. But again, there's something in us that says that's not right. Pay attention to how you feel when you speak. And if there is a feeling in your head, or some people have it in their heart, where you know the words that are coming out of your mouth are not exactly the case, then check yourself and say, hold on a second, I don't think that's quite right. And clarify your speech and say the words that you know to be as true as you possibly can. Of all the things that Jesus despised, that Jesus confronted and attacked, it was hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is at its core a duplicity. It is pretending to be one thing when I'm really something else. It's saying one thing when I know that something else is the reality. It's play acting. And in essence, what we're really doing when we're being hypocritical is we're splitting ourselves in two. We're splitting ourselves in part. And the word integrity has to do with pulling pieces together so that you're a solid whole. You're becoming a solid, real person who communicates words that reflect what I actually believe and who I actually am and what I know is right and good and true. And that makes us stronger people. That makes us more real people. That makes us trustworthy people, because we have learned the habit and we have practiced the discipline of speaking that which we know to be true, or at least what is not deception, what is not a lie. But when we lie, when we play the hypocrite, when we say what we know is not true, we are fracturing our souls. We are diminishing our personhood. And we are becoming untrustworthy people who in the end will be outed and exposed and found out to be a fraud. That's not who any of us want to be. And so if we want to become trustworthy people, we have to tell the truth. The second thing that we have to do is keep our promises. We have to keep our promises. That's not the same thing as telling the truth and not lying, because here sometimes maybe we had the best of intentions when we made the commitment, but now it's becoming difficult to keep our word. And now it becomes a question of an issue of not whether or not we tell lies or not, but whether we have the character and the backbone to deliver on what we've promised. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 33, "You have heard that it was said to people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.'" And that's a good thing. But he goes on to say in verse 34, "I tell you, do not swear at all." And then verse 37, he says, "Simply let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." I just love all of that. Because while it was good that there was taught of old that you should keep the oaths and keep the covenants and keep the promises that you make, Jesus, as he always does, is taking that deeper and further by saying, not just keep your promises, but just become the kind of person who doesn't need to layer oath upon oath in order to convince people, like again a con man would, that what you say is true. But that you're just a person who is so solid and has become so trustworthy that my word is my bond. that what I say you can count on, you can take it to the bank. I will find a way to fulfill the promises and commitments that I've made to you. You know, the promises that we make are what defines us as a people. And I think about who God is, and He is the freest of all possible beings, if that makes sense to you. He can do whatever it is that He wills to do. And the amazing thing about God is that He has willed, He has chosen to bind Himself to human beings by covenants and promises that He has made to such a degree that those promises actually become a part of the definition of the very being of who God is. That's mind-blowing to me. And He is the God who makes promises and who keeps them. And it is that is a huge part of how it is that we come to know Him and experience Him and understand who He is. And think about this, if that's not enough, if God were to fail to deliver on His promises, if He made an oath and He breaks that oath, He ceases to be God by definition. I say that in part because that's what He tells us in the book of Hebrews, isn't it? That God who cannot lie, that does not lie, has sworn Himself by an oath to humanity, and He will not break it. Because that's who, by definition, God is. He doesn't think up lies and tell lies. He doesn't make promises and then decide it's a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be to deliver on the promise, so I'm going to take it back. God is faithful. He is worthy of our trust because that's who He is. He makes promises and He keeps them. And as human beings who are created in His image, and especially as Christians who are recreated and restored to His image through Jesus, we must be a people who take our commitment seriously, who make promises that ought to be made, that are worth making, that are meaningful. And then we are people who will do our dead level best to keep those promises. I love the way Hannah Arendt writes about this. She says, without describing people, without being bound to the fulfillment of our promises, we would never be able to keep our identities. We would be condemned to wander helplessly and without direction in the darkness of each person's lonely heart, caught in the web of its contradictions. You follow what she's saying? Who are you? Well, I'm this today because I feel a strong impulse in this direction. But tomorrow I probably am going to have some impulses and yearnings that are going to lead me in this direction. And then maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, all of that's going to change and I'm going to be chasing after this and then that. And we're pulled in all these directions. And she says, you could not sustain a consistent identity of who you are over time apart from the promises that you make and the commitment to keep those promises. Who am I? Lawrence Kelley. I am a person who said, I will follow Jesus wherever He leads me. And that has been the fundamental guiding principle of my life that has kept me together and enabled me to resist the pulls and the temptations in 1,000 directions that I've encountered through my life. I am someone who said to Janice Simmons Kelley on December 19th, 1987, I'm going to be faithful and loyal and committed to you until death do we part. And in spite of all the struggles, all the trials, all the difficulties that have pulled in different directions, and she made that commitment to me, but we've maintained that promise. And that's who I am today. And if we hold in our hands the promises and the commitments that we make lightly, then we fumble and lose our very selves. We forfeit our souls to pursue this thing and that ultimately will prove meaningless. Let's think carefully about the commitments and the promises that we make, and once we make them, we keep them. Because the people around you may say, I don't believe everything he believes or she does. But when they make a promise, I believe them. That's the people we need to be. And that's what will make us strong. When we don't keep our promises, it's usually because of 3 things. It's going to cost me more money than I thought it was going to cost me. it's going to take me more time than I thought it was going to take to do this, or it's just going to be more blood, sweat, and tears than I realized when I made the commitment. And when we are in that moment of decision, deciding whether or not I'm going to keep the promise or whether I'm going to hold on to the money, the time, and the blood, sweat, and tears, we'll be thinking about the money, the time, the blood, sweat, and tears, but very soon those three things are going to be forgotten. And your word is what you and everybody else is going to remember. And it's your word that is going to define who you are. You can make some more money. You can figure out a way to make up some of the time that was spent doing this and that you lost on something else. And you can rehydrate after you've done the blood, sweat, and tears, or get a transfusion or whatever you need to do in order to get yourself built back up after you have laid it down to get the job done that you said you would do. And when you've done all that, you'll be an integrated whole. You'll be a solid person. You will have become more trustworthy than you even knew you were capable of being before you laid it on the line to get the job done, just like you said you would. It's an amazing thing what we can do if we determine to do so. Well, the third thing is that when we realize, and this sounds like I'm backtracking on what I just said, but because of our limited human capabilities, all of us at some point or other will find some commitment that we have made not getting fulfilled in the way or the time that we said that we would. And when we realize that that's happening, and it is critical that we do something. When we realize that we are not going to be able to get something done that we have promised someone that we were going to do in the time or in the way that we promised to do it, it's critical that we do these three things. We flag it, we explain it, and we fix it. You know what my tendency is when I realize I've promised somebody I was going to take care of that and then I realize it's not going to happen? What I want to do is ignore it and hopefully they won't notice. And then if I do get called on it, I want to go over there and make a bunch of excuses. And maybe even explain to them why really this was kind of your fault. Excuse myself. And then because there's now a turmoil and a problem as a result of my failure to do what I said I was going to do and the way I said I was going to do it, I just kind of want you to now take care of all the turmoil that's a result of my failure. So I want to hide it, I want to excuse it, and I want to put the burden of my failure on you to bear, the burden to bear, to carry. I don't know, something like that. That's my natural tendency. But as Christians, we've got to go against that tide. We've got to recognize that, no, my job is to flag it. That means even before the person realizes that a mistake has been made, realizes that there's a problem in the fulfillment of my promise, I'm going to be the one that calls their attention to it. I'm going to go out of my way to say, hey, I know I said this, and it's not looking like this is going to happen exactly the way that I had promised and I had planned to. And then we explain it. We say, here's what, not excuse it. There's a difference between explaining it and excusing it. Explaining, here's what happened. This unexpected contingency arose, and that's why things got off schedule. And I want you to understand where it's coming from. But I also want you to understand, thirdly and most importantly, here's what I'm going to do to fix it. I'm not going to say, I flagged it, and here's why it happened, and good luck. I'm going to say, I'm going to throw the flag on myself. Here's why it happened, and here's how I'm going to bear the additional burden to make good on what it was that I promised in the first place. What if Christians were known? That was the thing that they were known for. We get known for so many things that honestly are not that attractive and not that compelling. They're not that big and beautiful. And it's no wonder that the world isn't attracted to some of the things that we get known for. But what if we were known for the people, again, who had integrity, honesty, who kept their commitments and promises, and if something came up that they didn't live up to it, they called themselves on it, they explained it, and they fixed the problem to my satisfaction? What if we were just known for that, let alone anything else? What kind of difference might that make? And what kind of difference might it make in the culture of a congregation when each of us as members of one another lived by that kind of motto? Well, finally, and most importantly, because this is what all of what we've been talking about is based on, if you want to become a trustworthy person, be a Jesus follower. Be a Jesus follower. Now, if you've come here tonight and you're not a Christian, you're not a Jesus follower, and you've kind of thought, well, this is a pretty good lesson. I can see some practical values in this. I can take this to the workplace or in my family, and these could be some principles that could be useful there. Then great. I hope that you do take those, and I hope that you find them useful. But this is the most important thing that I have to say. Because all of us need to become more trustworthy. But character change, character transformation is the hardest thing that human beings have to try to do. And I'm convinced that the best way, and maybe when it comes to deep things like this, the only way for us to truly and profoundly and permanently be changed is by modeling the example of something that we find to be compelling. Someone that we find to be inspiring. And we look at them as a model and as example, and we're changed by that. We're touched by that. And we want to become like that. And when we talk about being a trustworthy person, let me say to you, there is no one in the history of the world who even comes close. Jesus entered the world making promises. When he came to the world and began his public ministry, he started making promises. And in spite of what you might have been taught in a comparative religions class in college, do not make the mistake. There was no other religious leader in the history of the world who came saying the things that Jesus said. Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And not only that, you've got a problem because you're disconnected from your Creator, your God, your Father. But if you follow me, I'm going to make a way where there is no way. You follow me, I am the way. I am the truth. And I am the life. I know a way. I am the way. I'm going to make a way from where sinful humanity is, distanced and separated and unlike God in their sin, and I'm going to make a way for you to get reconnected with God. I'm going to blaze a trail from earth to heaven. I'm going to open up a way that you can walk through. He even made claims to people at the funeral of their loved ones and said, I want you to trust me. Because I am the resurrection and the life. And he who believes in me, though he dies, yet shall he live. Those are amazing promises. Unlike anything that anyone else in the history of the world has ever said. But do you know that when it came time to make good on those promises, it was no easy thing? How do you get people from earth to heaven? How do you overcome the guilt, the shame, the fear that grips all of us, the sin and the corruption that is in our heart? How do you blaze a trail to make a way for people like that to be right with a holy God? How heavy is the burden of the sins of the world? And the fact of the matter is, when Jesus came down to the point when finally it was time to write the check that he had been, cash the check that he had been writing with his words. Here's what it says in John 12:27. Praying to the Father, now my soul is deeply troubled. Should I pray, save me from this hour? No, it is for this very hour that I came into the world. We should never think that Jesus' betrayal by his friends is being handed over into the hands of the leaders of his country to be condemned as unworthy and unfit to live in this world and nailed to a cross after being beaten nearly to death was an easy thing. It was the most difficult thing that's ever been accomplished in the world, but he made a promise, and he intended to keep it. You know, this was a promise that God had been making for a very long time. I think it goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, but certainly in Genesis chapter 15, there's this amazing and weird story where Abraham is put into this like deep trance-like sleep. And there's these animals that God had him to split in half and make into two rows. And then God appeared to Abraham in this vision, in this dream, as this smoking cauldron of some sort that passed between the parts. And as he passed between the parts, he made a promise to Abraham. You're familiar with the promises that he made to Abraham. Most of you are. He said, I'm going to give you this land. I'm going to make you a great nation. But ultimately, I'm going to bless the world through your descendants. And this weird vision that he's having, I think, means this. These animals that are split in half and God making a way between the two of them is saying, I'm making a promise. And may it be done to me as it is to these animals if I don't make good on my word. I will die if necessary in order to bless this world. And when he came in the flesh, that's exactly what he did. He made a promise and he kept his word. And when you follow that God, when you believe in that Jesus, the faithful and true witness, it will make you a more trustworthy person. And so there's nothing more important that you could do tonight if you want to become a person worthy of others' trust than to begin to follow the one who makes promises and keeps them. And because of the fact that he did the hardest thing, you can trust him with everything. You can trust him with your very self. And that's what we're calling on you to do tonight. To become a Jesus follower is to trust yourself with him. You say, you know, I've messed this up. And when I do this my way, it doesn't seem to work out the way that I thought it was going to. And I recognize there are problems within that I can't fix. And I need to begin to follow someone who can make a way where it doesn't seem to me there is a way. And I know you did the hardest thing. So I'm going to trust you with everything. If you're willing to make that commitment tonight and come and put him on in baptism, we'll be glad to help you. If you need to learn more about Jesus and this intrigues you, then ask the person that you came with, someone that you know, someone that you have come to recognize. There's a trustworthiness about them that's different. And let them explain to you why. Whatever way we can help you tonight, we encourage you to come while we stand, while we sing.